Hi, everyone. Um, Today I'm going to be talking about The Ones Who Walk Away from Amalas by Ursula K. Le Guin. And I am also going to be talking to you briefly about the midterm and the midterm study guide that is on Canvas. So I'm going to make this short and sweet because I'm noticing that my videos are getting longer and longer, and even I'm annoyed and tired of my voice and face at this point. So I'll keep them as short as I can. So I will I'll mostly do a share screen for this WebTeach. It'll be pretty quick. It's a short story. Sophia Petrillo. So that we can get through it pretty quickly. And then I'll talk about the midterm, what you need to know, what you need to study, and yeah, that'll be about it. So the first thing I'll do is I'll pull up the share screen here, and I will pull up our notes on the ones who walk away from Amalas. So again, it's a pretty short story, but there's still a lot to do with it. So I hope that you got something out of it. I'm sure you did. You're all, really bright and cool, and I miss you all. But in terms of the story, think about some of the literary terms that we've talked about over the entirety of the semester. There's no teach the class due this week, but that doesn't mean we can't go back into our quiver of literary terms and use them to apply them to any story, right? So think about symbolisms, the things that symbolize other things in this story, what they are, how they function. The imagery is incredibly important, especially because there's such a drastic shift at one point in the story of the imagery. So keep that in mind, how that affects things like tone. Think about metaphor. I mean, really symbolism, metaphor, and allegory are really like cousins to one another, right? Because it's a thing standing in for something else, right? Or a thing approximating something else. So think about metaphor, think about allegory. If perhaps this story, like the parables we looked at the beginning of the semester, if this story is perhaps an allegory for something. And think about the tone and the different tonal shifts that happen throughout the story. Because there's seriousness, there's comedy, there's joy, right? There's a whole gamut of things going on here. So think about that. Think about where and how you notice them at work in the story, in this very short story. Without giving too much away, right? Why do you think Amalas, right, has no clergy, no soldiers, no guild, based on what you're reading? Right, don't just pull something out of thin air, but based on what you read about Amalas, like why are those things non-existent? Or maybe what you know about Le Guin also, why are those things non-existent? Why the whole discussion of freedom, of happiness, of justice? It seems like those, according to Le Guin, might have something to do with one another. So what do they have to do with one another? Or just what do they have to do in terms of the content of the story? Again, not to give too much away, but why the terrible paradox, do you think? Like, what is Le Guin saying? What comment is she making about this paradox that happens between the reality of the overwhelming majority of people in the town and another reality, for lack of, to try and be as coy as I can. And then at the end, she finally, references or we understand kind of the meaning of the title, I guess I should say, the people who leave Amalas, right? So what do you make of them? And not just like they're great people or they're bad people, right? But like, what do they represent? What do they mean? If we're thinking in terms of symbolism or allegory or, those sorts of things. So what do you make of that ending, really? Again, just kind of quick, easy notes on this. Nothing to belabor any points, but these will help to generate ideas for the discussion board post, which is due as part of this this week's unit. So keep all those in mind. One final thing I'll say about the ones who walk away from Amelas is if you look at the name, right, if you look at Amelas, it's essentially Salem backwards with an O added, right? So Le Guin also does that for a very deliberate and specific reason. And you might want to think about why the name Amelas for this sort of fantasy, potentially, fairy tale or just past tense sort of place that she has created. So again, those are the notes. Now I'm going to shift to our class discussion of the midterm. Full cool doesn't feel real cool right now, honestly. I'll shift to our class discussion of the midterm practice test on Kahoot, which will be up tonight at some point. It's only 10 p.m. tonight. It's not 1:30 in the morning. So real proud of myself for getting this, out slightly earlier than last week. But you're all doing your rough drafts of your essays anyway, so no one's looking at this. All right, so we're in week 11 and we have the midterm study guide. I'm going to go over it quickly because the midterm, it's pretty self-explanatory, the things you should need to know for the midterm. So this midterm is going to cover, in terms of the text, right, the genre, it's only going to cover the short stories. So it's not a cumulative midterm. It's just, in terms of the readings, it's just on the stories that we've read since Sarah Kane. You're writing essay 2 on Sarah Kane, right? So the midterm is going to be on the 5 short stories since then. And you see them right here. They're also in the syllabus, right? So it's all lined up. Also, the literary concepts that we've talked about. Now, the literary concepts will be cumulative. So those since day 1 that we've talked about. So you'll want to do 2 things, and I'll show you what you'll want to do in a second. But essentially, the literary concepts from the chapters in backpack literature that are outlined every week on the syllabus class schedule. Make sure you know all of those literary terms and can define them in your own words, right? So that you have an understanding of what they mean. The Teach the Class presentations provide great examples, scaffolding, clarification on the majority of those terms. So make sure you're looking at the videos that are on Canvas and also reviewing the handouts that you got from when we were still face-to-face pre-March 12th. So keep that in mind. And then also the PowerPoint that I update every week on the literary terms. So those 3 things, the book, backpack literature, the PowerPoint, and the Teach the Classes, those are going to be your go-tos when you're studying these literary terms for the midterm. And the last thing I want to say is that, don't worry, they're not coming for me. The last thing I want to say for the midterm is there will be a full-length essay. And when I say full-length essay, I mean introduction, body, and conclusion. However long or short you take that to mean in terms of number of paragraphs or number of pages is up to you. As long as it's a complete essay in that it has an introduction with all of its parts, body paragraphs with all of their parts, and a conclusion with all of its parts, and it is revised, it flows, it's clear and thoughtful and well argued, well articulated, error-free, all of those things that an essay should be, go nuts. Then some nuts and bolts stuff, and then I'll go back and show you where you can access those literary terms in case anyone needs clarification on that. So the midterm is going to be on Canvas. if COVID-19 hadn't happened, we'd have it in class, but here we are. So the midterm is going to be on Canvas, so you will access it in week 12. It's not up yet, just the study guide will be up and the Kahoot practice test. It'll be due April 26th at 11:59, just like, Sunday, like everything else. Sunday after we get back, by the way, from break. It's going to be, you'll have the same amount of time to take the midterm as you do in class. It is timed 3 hours and 10 minutes. So keep that in mind. Once you start the midterm, that clock starts ticking away. You do need access to our class Canvas page. If you follow me on Instagram, you can find ways of getting free internet through Spectrum for 60 days if you're a student. So if you're having any problem getting internet, check that out or let me know. The test will be 1 full-length in-class essay response, like I said, and then 25 matching true, false, and multiple choice questions. The essay will be worth 10 points. Each of the 25 responses will be worth 0.4 points each for a grand total altogether of 20 points, 20 percentage points for the midterm. So keep that in mind. As far as the test is concerned, you can use whatever's at your disposal, right? This is going to be an online test, so keep that in mind. But don't collaborate, no cheating. And also keep in mind, you don't want to just dive right in, right? You still want to study and prepare for this thing, because if you just take the road of, oh, I'll just wait until the day of and just kind of flip through all these 5 stories that are all in different places and I forgot to highlight and all that stuff, right? Like, that's not going to bode well for you. You want to have a plan, you want to have an organized approach to this. You want to really be thinking about these texts, so keep that in mind. There is no makeup for the midterm, so also keep that in mind. And as far as the duration of the midterm, the timing for the midterm, if you are registered with DSS and you've supplied me with your knowledge of your green sheet before the midterm takes place, contact me or I will contact you regarding the timing accommodations or any other accommodations that you may need. So keep that in mind. So that's about it for the midterm. Again, if you have questions, feel free to ask well in advance so that, again, you go into that thing prepared.